If you're serious about military history and survival under extreme conditions, subscribe to the Legacy of Survival channel right now, because what we're about to cover is not trivia, not shock content, and not recycled war stories. This is the reality of human endurance during World War II, where food was not about comfort, culture, or even nutrition in the modern sense. It was about staying alive one more day. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 8 foods that soldiers across multiple fronts were forced to eat, not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was starvation. These are documented, verifiable practices, and understanding them gives us a clearer picture of how armies survived logistical collapse, siege warfare, and prolonged isolation. Stay with me, because the lessons hidden in these meals still matter for anyone studying survival, military planning, or human resilience. This story begins with sawdust bread and filler loaves that replaced real grain when supply chains failed. Across Europe, especially on the Eastern Front, flour shortages became catastrophic. Bakeries working for armies stretched wheat with sawdust, cellulose, ground straw, and sometimes pulverized bark. German and Soviet soldiers alike encountered bread that barely qualified as food, yet it provided bulk calories and a psychological sense of a meal. The practical lesson here is simple and brutal. In survival conditions, indigestible fillers may still be used to extend scarce calories, but they carry long-term health costs. Modern survival planners study this to understand why non-nutritive bulk should only ever be a last resort. Next comes horse meat taken straight from the battlefield. When mechanized units stalled and supply convoys were destroyed, horses became emergency rations. This was common for both the German Wehrmacht and Soviet units during brutal winters. Horses killed by shellfire were butchered on the spot, often without proper bleeding or sanitation. Soldiers learned quickly which parts could be eaten raw, boiled, or dried. The survival application is clear. Knowing basic field butchery and prioritizing muscle cuts over organs can reduce disease risk when refrigeration and hygiene are impossible. Frozen bread rations deserve attention because they shaped daily behavior in sub-zero combat zones. On the Eastern Front, bread froze solid within minutes. Soldiers sawed loaves apart or softened them by holding them against their bodies. This wasn't inconvenience. It was a calorie access problem. If you couldn't eat, you couldn't fight. The takeaway for modern survivalists is understanding thermal food management. Keeping rations close to body heat can be as critical as protecting weapons from freezing. Then there was ersatz coffee made from roasted acorns, chicory roots, and barley. Caffeine was rare, but the ritual mattered. Soldiers drank these substitutes to maintain morale and routine under constant stress. While nutritionally empty, the psychological benefit was enormous. Survival psychology today recognizes that familiar routines, even without real sustenance, stabilize decision-making under prolonged threat. In the Pacific Theater, starvation pushed soldiers toward insects and grubs. Japanese troops, especially isolated island garrisons of the Imperial Japanese Army, consumed beetles, larvae and termites when supply drops stopped. These were not survival manuals. These were desperate adaptations learned through necessity. Insects provided protein and fat, and soldiers learned which species caused illness. This knowledge now feeds directly into modern entomophagy research used by disaster response planners. Mouldy ration meat was another grim reality. Canned meat, often corned beef or spam-like products, frequently spoiled in tropical or damp conditions. Soldiers scraped mould off and ate what remained. The risk of botulism and food poisoning was real, but hunger overruled caution. The modern lesson is critical. Visible spoilage is not always the full danger. WWII field reports are now used in training to emphasize why proper preservation methods matter in long-term storage. Captured enemy rations formed another disturbing food source. Soldiers routinely ate whatever they could seize, regardless of origin. Soviet troops consumed German canned goods, Germans ate captured Red Army rations, and Allied troops did the same when cut off. This practice taught soldiers adaptability, but also exposed them to unfamiliar preservatives and digestive stress. Today, survival doctrine emphasizes testing small quantities first when consuming unknown food sources. Finally, boiled leather and equipment scraps marked the lowest point of desperation. Soldiers cut straps, boots and harnesses into pieces, boiling them for gelatin and trace nutrients. This was never sustainable, but it delayed death. Modern survival instructors study these accounts to underline a harsh truth. Protein extraction from non-food materials can buy time, but it is not a solution, only a delay. These 8 foods reveal something important. WWII soldiers were not reckless or ignorant. They were adapting intelligently to collapsing systems, limited information, and relentless pressure. For historians, these meals expose the logistical failures behind the battles. For survivalists, they demonstrate the line between endurance and collapse. If this deep, uncomfortable history matters to you, subscribe to Legacy of Survival. Share this episode with someone who studies war or preparedness seriously, and keep this knowledge alive. Understanding how people survived the worst conditions humanity has created may one day help prevent repeating them, or help someone survive when systems fail again.